You could say 200 countries plus. We can't do that. So at a certain point over the next week and a half or so, or maybe before, we're going to send out a letter. We talked to many of the countries, and we're just going to tell them what they have to pay to do business in the United States.
Donald Trump is unhappy with the response he has received so far from all nations around the world. After putting tariffs on many countries and claiming that everyone wants a deal with the U.S., more than 200 nations still haven't signed any real trade agreement.
Which countries, if any, are close to agreements with the administration?
Well, that's an interesting question. We've made a deal with China. We've made a deal with probably 4 or 5 different countries, with the UK.
There is a lack of confidence in how he answers the questions because his tariff plan is falling apart. The few agreements that exist are just temporary fixes, not full bilateral agreements. It's almost 2 weeks after he claimed he had a deal with China, but there has been no single response from the Chinese president confirming this deal. Now Trump is sending out threats and warnings, but other countries are pushing back. The man who promised quick deals is still waiting for his first one. So what's really going on? Let's get into it. When he started his aggressive tariffs, Donald Trump made a loud and proud promise that his administration would sign 90 trade deals in 90 days. He announced it with his usual confidence at campaign rallies and on social media. To his supporters, it sounded like bold leadership. To critics, it sounded too good to be true. Now that the 90 days are almost over, the truth is impossible to ignore. Not a single real trade agreement has been finalized. What Trump's team is calling deals are mostly vague memoranda or early-stage frameworks, documents that fall far short of binding agreements. Instead of delivering global progress, the effort has morphed into a publicity campaign where headlines take priority over results.
But this afternoon, with only 10 days left in that timeline, it appears the administration has only 1.5 agreements in place.
The question many are asking now is why world leaders are not rushing to sign anything with Trump. If the United States is so eager, why are other countries keeping their distance? One of Trump's boldest claims was that he had already made a major deal with China's President Xi Jinping. He said it was done and dusted, ready to bring stability after years of trade fights. But something strange happened. President Xi Jinping has not made any official statement nor signed anything, even though his officials say a deal has been reached. Even President Trump admitted that Xi was hard to negotiate with. This silence from Xi Jinping isn't just awkward. It might be a strategy. Some analysts believe that China is choosing to stay quiet on purpose, letting Trump make bold claims that it refuses to support. In doing so, China avoids taking any blame while Trump looks like he made something up. This could be China's way of quietly damaging Trump's image, especially as tensions over tariffs and supply chains continue to hurt both countries' economies. The lack of response from Beijing is starting to look less like hesitation and more like a calculated move. Months into the tariff war, businesses remain paralyzed by confusion and shifting rules. From auto parts to agricultural exports, uncertainty reigns. Behind the scenes, even Trump's own allies are admitting this is mostly smoke and mirrors. The administration is racing against a self-imposed political clock, not economic necessity. Even Mark Short, Trump's former legislative affairs director, admitted this truth bluntly, saying, "What we have at this point are general frameworks from only 2 countries out of about 200 nations in the world." These are the same frameworks that Peter Navarro, the Trump trade advisor, once swore would become 90 deals in 90 days. It is clear it is not happening as the July 9th deadline draws close. What did happen is this. Trump picked a fight with the world by slapping tariffs on friend and foe alike. He disrupted global supply chains, spooked financial markets, and created deep anxiety across entire industries, from Midwest farmers to Wall Street bankers. Then, when the economic consequences became impossible to ignore, he began reaching for frameworks as lifelines. And now, these incomplete drafts are being packaged as diplomatic coups. Is this a strategy? Or is it desperation dressed up as deal-making? The answer becomes more troubling the longer one examines Trump's own behavior. The president is laser-focused on the July 9th deadline, his administration's own artificial finish line for delivering results. But even with this disappointing result, Trump is not backing down. On July 9th, The pause ends, and the penalties will begin. Like it or not, he says, countries will have to start paying up to 50% tariffs unless they make a deal with the US. In a weekend interview on Fox News, Trump proudly announced that letters would soon be sent to foreign governments. His message? Congratulations, you now have the privilege of trading with us. Now you're going to pay 25% or 35% or 50%. To Trump, it's just business, a power move meant to show strength. But to the rest of the world, it lands like an insult. Allies see it not as negotiation, but extortion dressed up as diplomacy. And that's what has shocked world leaders. They've seen Trump make big threats before, only to walk them back later. In 2018, he said he'd hit Europe with car tariffs. Then he backed off. With China, he made a big deal about a trade agreement. Then it fell apart. Many expected the same here. But now he's saying this time is different. What makes this more worrying is Trump's own admission that it's impossible to negotiate with everyone. There are 200 countries, he said. You can't talk to all of them. Yet he still insists they must all make deals or face massive tariffs. He has even accidentally admitted that he has no deal. So what happens to the 180-plus countries he hasn't even talked to yet? Do they all get punished anyway? The letters Trump is preparing are not just firm, they're insulting, and the timing couldn't be worse. The global economy is already fragile. Inflation is hurting buyers and sellers around the world. Supply chains are still unstable. And now, the US, which is supposed to be a leader, is threatening to throw fuel on the fire. Trump may think this kind of pressure works, but in truth, it's pushing other countries away. Many US allies, like Canada, Germany, South Korea, and Japan, are losing patience. Some are considering striking deals without America. Others are preparing their own tariffs in return. If that happens, every day Americans will feel the pain. Prices at stores will go up. Jobs could be lost. Farmers could lose buyers. And all because Trump wants to look tough. But why is Trump rushing? Deals like these usually take months or years to achieve. So, what is at stake for Trump? Well, the rush is because Trump isn't just negotiating with foreign powers. He's also negotiating with Wall Street, the Federal Reserve, and most critically, his voter base. His credibility on economic issues has always hinged on his self-styled image as the ultimate deal-maker. That image is under threat. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary and former hedge fund veteran, has already hinted that the July deadline may need to be extended, but admits that it would be up to Trump to make that call. His reasoning is, many of the 18 nations still in talks with the US are negotiating in good faith. That's the diplomatic way of him saying, we're nowhere close to final agreements. This conflict, between public confidence and private chaos, has become the hallmark of Trump's trade policy. And there's a pattern here worth watching. Time and again, foreign governments have figured out that if they simply stall long enough, Trump's own domestic pressures will force him to fold. As Mark Short noted, countries now understand that Trump is sensitive to bond market tremors and economic jitters. In essence, the president's greatest negotiating weakness is his obsession with appearing strong. If Trump fails to deliver real deals by July, the consequences could be immediate. Wall Street might tumble, the dollar could wobble, interest rates might spike in a panic, and Trump's 2026 midterm election strategy, built entirely on the premise of economic genius, could fall apart like a house of cards. In fact, some economists are already warning of a chilling scenario, that this administration is drifting toward a trade-induced recession while pretending everything is fine. And here's where you should start paying attention. Let's talk about the UK deal as an example. The first deal Trump claimed was a victory with the United Kingdom. He said he had secured the first major trade agreement since starting his aggressive tariff campaign. But when reporters and experts looked into it, they found that this deal was not actually a trade deal at all. It was a temporary agreement that simply allowed current trade flows to continue while formal negotiations dragged on. It didn't bring any new benefits or lower any new tariffs. It was, essentially, an agreement to keep talking. British officials were quick to clarify that this was not a final deal and that more work needed to be done. Behind closed doors, many UK diplomats are frustrated with Trump's America First approach. They worry that the US is trying to force them into unfair terms that could hurt British industries. Meanwhile, inside the White House, tensions are rising. Trump's top trade advisor, Scott Bessent, is under serious pressure. When he joined Trump's team, many thought he was a financial expert who could bring order to trade talks. But now things are falling apart, and Bessent is being blamed. Reports show that Bessent never supported the 90 Deals plan. He warned that it was unrealistic and risky. But Trump ignored the advice and made the promise anyway. Now, with the world refusing to play along and no major deals to show, Trump's team is pointing fingers. Sources say Bessent is frustrated and exhausted. Some wonder if he might resign before he gets fired. Instead of arguing with Trump, most countries are choosing a quieter, more decisive route. They're simply moving on. While Trump chases headlines with deals that never materialize, the rest of the world is forming real long-term partnerships. Without the United States, the European Union is deepening ties with South Korea and India through digital and agricultural agreements. In Asia, the RCEP trade pact moves forward, entirely without US participation. Even America's closest neighbors, Canada and Mexico, are now holding talks with Japan and the EU, charting a course that leaves Washington behind. The message is clear. America is no longer seen as a reliable trade partner. And rather than wait for deals that may never come, other countries are building new systems that don't revolve around Washington at all. Trump's threats no longer intimidate, and his promises no longer persuade. This shift is having real consequences. Countries that once relied on access to the US market are grappling with canceled contracts and sudden tariff shocks. Small nations that built export infrastructure for American buyers are now left in limbo. Meanwhile, major global companies are pulling supply chains out of the US, seeking more predictable partners elsewhere. In trying to force trade to come back home, Trump has made America look risky, erratic, and increasingly isolated. Instead of strengthening the economy, his tactics have pushed the world to look elsewhere for opportunity. Africa is building its own continent-wide trade zone. Latin America is getting closer to China. In Asia, trade between neighboring countries is growing, and the US is no longer essential to the process. As US influence fades, a new world order is quietly taking shape, and it may no longer need American leadership. How long can America hold on to economic power if the world no longer listens? Even America's strongest allies are beginning to distance themselves. Japan, Canada, South Korea, and Australia, longtime partners, are now openly voicing concern over Trump's hostile approach. These aren't just diplomatic statements. These are reactions to real economic harm, from steel to dairy to digital services. For a while, corporate America stayed quiet, hoping the storm would pass. But now, even the business community is speaking out. Trade associations, investment leaders, and major CEOs are asking for the one thing the Trump agenda hasn't delivered: stability. Big companies are freezing new investments, unsure what tariffs or regulations will hit them next. Costs are rising, supply chains are fraying, international partners are backing away. Even some CEOs who once backed Trump are privately warning that this chaos could wreck quarterly earnings and long-term strategy. The world is watching, markets are watching, and the clock is ticking. Because while Trump focuses on looking tough, the world is building something new. And this time, it doesn't need America at the center. Hit that subscribe button to stay ahead of the shift, and don't forget to like and share if this video was valuable. See you in the next one.